Welcome to Galactic Grandmother Heart to Heart. My name is April, and my special returning guest is Jen Sullivan. Jen comes to us from the big island of Hawaii, and we have actually done a couple of interviews prior to this one about her books, which I will link below. I see you've got your books behind you there. One is Child of the Universe.
Yep, that was
And
number
the other
one.
one is Gift of the Stars. Her latest book, which is this one, which is gorgeous, The Daughters of Man. And they're all available on Amazon. That's where I got my copy. But Jen has a background. Was an international journalist. She has a master's from a prestigious university in London. She has her own publishing company, and she writes about something very near and dear to my heart, previous lifetimes. I think it's really important, not only from a personal standpoint, to become aware of our own previous lifetimes, but from a collective consciousness standpoint, it really like pulls together history of the ancient history that we are trying to piece together because it's kind of been kept from us. So welcome so much, Jen. I really appreciate you coming to us.
Wow, I appreciate you spending time just reading my books again and inviting me back on and taking the time to talk a little bit about it. The appreciation is mine as well.
Oh, this one,
So,
we had spoken before about you coming in a previous lifetime. You had been in one of the caverns or tunnels underneath the earth during a natural cataclysm of some sort.
mhm.
And this is how you start this book out, which is pretty interesting, is that you're talking about coming out, your people coming out of the tunnels and caves in the mountains after a sort of natural disaster. And can you talk about the history that you were able to observe in this lifetime?
Yes, of course. So my guesstimate is that this lifetime took place somewhere between maybe 6 to 10,000 years ago.
Mhm.
It would have been in a place that we call Iraq now or Iran now, but in that Mesopotamian Sumerian region that we learned was kind of like the cradle of civilization, of what we know now as civilization, where it all started. And this lifetime just predates the beginning of that civilization, and it gives inclination as to what possibly could have happened to spur that civilization, to allow it to kind of unfold into the world that we have around us. And that's kind of where I start off with everything.
Yeah, that was pretty exciting. And you mentioned that there was a red crystal that was kept. Uh, Secluded in the with the people in under the earth there. Can you talk about that and where it came from? And
Yeah, of course. In all three of my books, actually, I've noticed it was a bit of a resonating theme that I needed to bring it up and continuously talk about it, because when I had the hypnosis sessions, prior, 2017 through 2020, that inspired all of these books that I've written, that was kind of the inspiration for it.
the red crystal in a previous lifetime of mine in Atlantis was also there. And I think that was a
Yes.
commonality that
The red crystal was something that through these hypnosis sessions kept showing up over and over and over again. And it led me to understand that they did have their own role in this story, and they definitely needed to be spoken about as, in regards to power and crystals and energy. That this was a massive, a very powerful crystal that was brought from what we would call the home planet of what colonized Earth, before Earth was truly inhabited. So.
and we know crystals are record keepers. So you were bringing that red crystal had some important records, correct?
That's what I found, that it in at different points in different lifetimes I had encountered these crystals, and within them they held stories beyond myself, something that had been trapped within these crystals that allowed me to learn and engage and kind of survive in future lifetimes. So with that, I also found that it had powers of good and it had powers of great destruction. It all depended on the owner or the holder's inclination at that point. So it wasn't something I noticed in the lifetimes that mentioned them. It wasn't something to be taken very lightly. It was something to be revered and something to be taken with great caution to approach these kind of crystals.
Yes. Now, the thing that became pretty interesting because there were what you called the watchers or enslavers. And it all kind of goes back as you read the story to there were three colonized planets. Can you talk about that? And
Definitely, I can give you a little bit more insight into that. So this lifetime is about the a woman whose name is Soraya, and she is the daughter of a tribal chief in that era that I just spoke about. And during the course of her education, she comes to understand that all the eldest daughters in their community are to be held as kind of sacred gifts to these interstellar travelers, these watchers that they have historically spoken about in their oral legends. And all the eldest daughters would be held as potential wives one day for these aliens, these visitors who would show up at one point. And they knew from their oral legends that they had been here on Earth before, that they had enslaved us, and that they left during a time of great cataclysm. So while the Earth was fixing itself and making itself habitable again, her people, my people, Soraya's people at that time, lived within the cave systems in that region and survived. And as the world became habitable again, they came out and they learned to survive again and did quite well, and almost forgot that these watchers might be wanting wives and returning one day. And it is during Soraya's lifetime that the watchers do return. And they come back and they're looking for more than just wives. They're looking to recreate their civilization here on Earth and re-enslave their ancestors of those that they had previously enslaved. So I know it's a bit of a mouthful, but that's kind of in
yeah,
a nutshell, a little bit of the background there.
and it kind of made me think as we'll talk about more of this particular lifetime, but it made me wonder if those same watchers, which you described them as being twice as big and very muscular and very powerful, almost a warrior class of alien or extraterrestrial. It made me wonder if these aren't some of the same ETs that are still here working from behind, the shadows.
I would think even more so than just the shadows. In my understanding, it's become a complete integration into society where we have had to evolve having both sets of genes of being hybridizations of these ancient, what we would have called gods back then, and then their
Uh-huh.
children, demigods. But we're technically, we all hold a bit of that within us because what I understood from the sessions is even though that they were aliens coming to Earth at that time and coming to enslave us, they were more celestial cousins than we had realized. They were also kind of an experiment as Earth was from the same home planet. They
Oh,
just were lucky to have a planet that didn't incur as many cataclysms as we do here on Earth. So their development was not stagnated by these massive, natural disasters that we've incurred or man-made disasters that we've incurred as well. So
and
it's
these watchers knew when the cataclysms were coming and they would leave. And then
yes,
they would come back after Earth and we had rebuilt somewhat, correct?
most that's what I came to understand, that they had a more advanced system for understanding the occurrence of cataclysms that could be coming. They could monitor space. They could see when, as I talk about in this book, it's a cataclysmic, like a meteorite shower that comes and hits Earth, a massive explosion and flooding. Everything is just kind of disturbed and unlivable for quite some time. And they could tell that that was on its way, and
Wow.
primitive people had no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Getting back to your story,
Mm.
the women that were taken by the Watchers because they were so big, many of them died during childbirth. And in fact, your own mother in that lifetime had died, correct? Due to
Correct.
the childbirth.
Yes, not because though of the Watchers, she had predated and died before their arrival. That was just a
Oh,
bit of just a bit of a traumatic beginning to birth for Soraya at that point. But with the other women who were taken as wives and were impregnated by the Watchers, yes, they were violated. They were also given birth to these children that were so big that they couldn't physically withstand the birthing process of giving birth to something so large. So they were seen as a replaceable commodity in the community. They were just seen as a vessel to be used and to create more hybrid children for the continuation of the Watchers.
now did they have some like a crude C-section at that time to remove these big children if they couldn't birth them naturally?
I believe they did, and later found out similar visitors did have the same technology, which they did use to help. But I felt that the reason they didn't was because they saw the women as just replaceable, as something that they could easily, within the next 2 years, the next girl would be 13 or 14 and ready to begin that process.
Oh my
It
goodness.
wasn't a process where they needed to continue having more children with that one specific woman. So. It was disposable culture in its
Wow.
earliest modes.
Now, let me see. Your father had remarried after when you were how old were you when he remarried?
In that lifetime, I guess to be somewhere between probably 10 to 14 in that range, probably around 12, 13, maybe.
And you were the oldest daughter, the eldest daughter that was
Yes.
going to
And
be saved to be a possible bride of these Watchers.
correct. And the only daughter for my father at that point as well, too, from his first wife. So he treated me less like a daughter that was preparing for a lifetime as a wife of a watcher. And he prepared me more to learn how to rule over our people, which was what his job was. He was what we called big man. And the big man was the person who was in charge of just making sure everything that needed to get done in our community got done, and that everyone was good and had what they needed, and we were able to trade with other communities successfully. So he taught me his trade rather than preparing me to become a wife, and it served me later on in my life actually as a survival mechanism in that lifetime.
Now, he did remarry, and I
Yes.
know you were at first not happy about that, but you came to love the children that your stepmom and your father had, and you got into something very interesting, I thought, and that was the energy healing.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Yes, of course. So in that lifetime, in that community, all women, all men were expected to kind of learn and pick up a trade that would be beneficial to their community. And you were allowed to pick what you liked. But because of my stepmother's presence, I was very influenced by her energy healing history. And she shared much of what had been lost to me in my mother's death, as my mother was part of the same line of energy healers.
Oh,
So as a good replacement, she ended up coming into my life and exposing me to that world, and I became part of a group that learned how to heal with energy, reset bones, helping to cure, like to keep people comfortable in their illnesses, and as they grew older, just working with them to keep them flexible and young, and just all
mhm.
around working with people's bodies, minds, and souls in that community. And it was very rewarding work. And I specialized within, I wanted to bring children into the world. So that was kind of like a midwifery facet to that area.
Nice.
Yeah.
And when, let me see, what happened to precipitate the return of the Watchers? You had been going along, and that whole myth, so to speak, was in the background. And then what happened?
Yeah, so this myth is there, and my father, as the leader of the community, tells me one day that the reason that my mother and him had me as a child was because he had actually met my mother on her way to her wedding to another big man, and she had stayed in our community, and he convinced her to stay and to marry him instead. And it caused a bit of a thing, a rift within our two communities. And he felt that now that I was old enough to marry, that the Watchers were never going to return. There was no need to appease the gods for that. Why waste a perfectly good woman, was what I believe were his words. And that I would then be used to rectify what he had done wrong. And he would offer me as a bride over to the big man's son, and we would join our two communities that way and rectify all that was wrong. And as I was trying to fight my way out of that marriage, the Watchers returned, and I realized I had an even bigger marriage now on my plate that I could not argue my way out of.
Yeah, how scary.
Yeah,
Scary.
right.
And
Ugh.
then, do you have any idea what kind of a ET species the Watchers were?
I feel that they were whatever we are as human. I mentioned three different types of beings in the book, and I talk about the Watchers, the humans, and then also a third type. And I think all three of us were part of an experiment by a home planet. And I think instead of just testing out one planet to see if they would continue, their lifeline, they went to three, possibly more. And our our destiny was inevitably to kind of one after another conquer, destroy each other, and then end up on the planet of like least survival, which is Earth, the one with the most cataclysms, the one with the most issues. And now all three of our species are here on Earth, and we're left to kind of mix together, make the most of it, or die and be annihilated as all three species. So, like cousins, celestial cousins in a weird way, but
But
experiments by a home planet.
it seems that we kind of worked it out. We
Yeah.
survived.
Definitely, it does, and I think truly that's where a lot of our issues with each other come from is just the mixing and the previous the history that's come so far before us that we can't even recall it. It's just so
Right.
far in the past, but
Yeah.
it's still there within us.
Now, let me see. What else do I have on here? And when the Watchers came back, there was a pretty dramatic scene. Would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, definitely. My father at the time in that lifetime was adamant that we should fight the Watchers when they arrived. He said this is not the time for us to be re-enslaved. We're doing well as a community. We should not hide. We shouldn't run. We should just take them on now. Not realizing what was about to step off of that ship and something twice the size of us with technology we couldn't even begin to compete with. And we what was supposed to be an offering, a wedding ceremony in many ways of a group of young women to be handed over ended up turning into a massacre when my father decided to try and just use brute force to try to take us back, and it didn't work out. The wedding ended up turning into just a complete annihilation of everybody that was there. And the only reason I escaped was because I was injured so badly. I was able to look as if I had passed during the uh issue, during the fight, and they left me. But I survived in that lifetime. I
And
totally
escape.
survived and escaped.
Yes, we don't want to give everything away, but all of the exciting parts in this book and where you escaped to and what you did, but you did have help. And it was interesting because at one point where you're the man and the woman that helped you escape and put you in a safe place to stay, the woman was a healing woman. And she gave you some mushrooms to take when you felt like you were just completely emotionally and physically and mentally down. Can you tell us about that experience when you ate those mushrooms?
Yeah, this was a very interesting part that I felt that it took me a little while to write about it because I wanted it to be exactly what it was in that, in that session. So at this point, I had been living in a cave system that our ancient peoples had inhabited for a very thousands of years, perhaps just to stay alive during these cataclysmic changes. And they were uninhabited for a very long time. And the two people who rescued me from my injury in that wedding ceremony, they brought me to this cave system to stay. And they told me within the cave it had healing powers, that the air in there would heal me fast, and it did. But I was eventually left alone. They needed to go and rejoin their communities, continue trying to fight, continue the resistance against the Watchers. And I was left a packet of mushrooms. Mushrooms were one of the main things that they also grew within the caves to eat and to survive. So they were very plentiful and useful. The mushrooms that the healing woman gave me, though, caused me to have these intense hallucinations that literally felt like they had transported me to another realm within the cave. And I remember clearly in this like what it did. It was amazing. It actually felt like the wall in front of me, this massive rock wall, had started moving forward, and from the rock emerged this giant, like rock like being, this stony being that ended up taking me on this journey through the cave system, showing me the trials and tribulation of my people and just what had happened to my family after they were all, massacred in that wedding ceremony. And also, it put me in touch with a previous lifetime in that trip with the stone man in the cave, and it brought me in touch with Kala from Child of the Universe and her role as the leader of Lemuria during the downfall of Lemuria. So the two souls kind of touch for just a brief moment in that little bit, and I want to say that it empowers Soraya in that lifetime because of it. It empowers her to go on and to continue fighting after she's left to just kind of stay in this cave and survive. So
She gained some peace from the experience.
very much
Um,
so. And a sense of self that gave her great direction and didn't allow her to wallow in depression and and, self-doubt. It was very empowering.
Now, this story takes quite a dramatic turn when you leave the cave system.
Mhm.
And can you speak to that?
Sure. With the help of the journeyman one day, we encountered two of the watchers who were up on the mountain near the caves that I was being hidden in. And we were able to trap them within the cave system and hopefully keep them there and allow them to perish within the cave system. From there, the journeyman told me he had a plan to hide me in just broad daylight. That was like the smartest thing he thought he could do, was not to hide me anymore, but put me out so obvious within society that they wouldn't even think to know it was that I was the daughter of, the clan that had been completely annihilated. So uh, I ended up having the opportunity to become the second wife to the big man of the largest community that was left under control of the Watchers. And every day I would be dressed and a large veil would be placed over me, just as his first wife. And that was to show that we were the property of the big man and the Watchers could not ask for us as
Oh,
wives. So every day I continued to administer and help within my community as I had by like with my father, when we were living in our community when before everything had happened. And I was able to use that knowledge to help my new husband in running his community while he also helped tried to, build resistance against the Watchers to try to free us. So
and something happened that you replaced him as the great lady. Is that what they called you?
great lady. See, my husband at the time had a first wife, and she was adamant that he had brought in a second wife because she had given birth to a girl and like right before I was brought on as the second wife, and she held herself responsible for it, but she also held me responsible for it. And we had a very just a very difficult relationship. And at the end, it was a fight between the two of them that caused him to die and her to die. And I was left as the only person there, able to run the to meet the quotas that the Watchers demanded from us every 3 to 4 months, I just kept the place running. I sat down and just, as instinct had taught me from my father, just kept everything going and raised his child that was left over from the tragedy between the two of them. And for many, many years, also just handed over the daughters that I had been previously been a group of and spared of. So it weighed heavily on me to continue this, but it did. So.
Now, I had noticed that you had, in the beginning of the story, you had talked about, let me just find it, the silver domes that were now covered with ice.
Mm.
And then you talked about living under domes,
Hmm.
silver domes, in, it sounds like, the desert. Now, are those two separate places? Are the original silver domes that you talked about covered with ice? Would you say that's like Antarctica, or what would you can you explain those silver domes to me?
Sure. The silver domes to me have always represented the early kind of colonization, hybridization efforts of our people with whatever was left of either the home planet or whatever has was left of the other colonizations of the home planet. And I think these silver domes reappear because they're easily created structures that people, if humans beings want to travel to interstellarly, that's the design that seems to be the most impactful. And I think that's why they continued to have those silver domes. Though I do feel that they were in different spots. I do feel one was in possibly what would be Antarctica now, and the other dome would have been probably further up in into the north of Iraq, north of Iran, closer up more to Turkey, and that region is where the domes I speak of in this third book would be.
And that's where you your community uh had shelter from the sun and elements,
Yeah.
correct?
Yes, we ended up like after a while we had to recreate our society again in this book, and the dome situation was very useful because we were trying to bring more hybrid children from our between the humans and these other beings and to create them. So it was, a fast structure. It seems to be something that helped to keep people safe and protected from the elements, but always not never a rudimentary structure, always very kind of advanced in their own way.
This lifetime was pretty amazing with how everything, all these major twists and turns, because after you've been doing your playing your role as the great lady,
Hmm.
then another cataclysmic uh, event happens, correct?
Yes. This cataclysmic event seems to be what was, again, like just this meteorite landing not too far away and kind of creating this massive swell and melting of ice that starts coming down the mountain into our community and just engulfs it in this watery sludge. And it just starts rising and covering up everything in our community. Prior to it, it seems the Watchers had taken their children, their hybrid children, workers. They had taken many of the women as well, and those who were left in the community when this happened, it left them to be just, annihilated by it as well. It wasn't the best situation, but it is what I could tell. It was during a time where we had started to create these towers that you would call ziggurats now, these like seven-layered towers. And I had the perspective of being up high on one of them as I watched these waters rise up and engulf and take over everyone. And the only thing that ended up saving me from it was this other group of beings who had been incognito the whole time because there was only three of them left. And they had been destroyed by the Watchers and had come to Earth looking for refuge, only to realize the Watchers were now here too. So it was a
And
bit of a, yeah, a bit of a situation, but I think they, rather than it just being lucky and coincidence, they understood our genetic line and they were looking to save those they were most compatible with. And I think that's what ended up being the case.
and you went to live on a spaceship for a while.
That's exactly what came to me in the session, that we had been saved by this other small group, and they didn't really want anything from us in return. But over the time that we had been on the ship and we were being, taken care of by them, they showed us their hybridization, just their these beautiful babies they had in these big tubes. And that's the best way I can put it. They were trying to recreate their own kind, and it wasn't going very well. And so we began to help and assist and volunteer and just try to help nurture the babies and to help them grow. And it was successful. So while we're all hiding from the watchers, we realize that we're able to continue life without, you know, having to
No.
depend on the conventional method to it. So.
Now, were these clones or test tube babies, or how would you describe these babies?
Probably a little bit of both, actually. My understanding was that they knew how to manipulate their genetic codes, that they could clone themselves, but perhaps not specifically. There were three of them, so my guess is they had also balanced out trying to negotiate between all of their chromosomes and make good matches that would make the children sturdy and, healthy. But they didn't grow well in space, and that was the issue, was that they needed to be on a planet, and then that would create the healthiest environment for them. It was just so unsafe. So for a long time, we just tried to raise them in space. And when we felt the need that the Watchers were no longer as big of a threat as we had once thought, we settled on Earth in a small community. And again, we constructed these domes, and the children lived underneath them. It was a really interesting lifetime to understand, because it
Yes.
was not something, like, truly, it was not something that I had ever thought about, or I'd ever been like,
Uh-huh.
oh, yeah, I lived on a spaceship for a while and had a couple of, hybrid babies. No, it was definitely news to me when I was going through this session. And I know it kind of sounds a bit out there, but the interesting thing is, if can I tell you a little bit about I don't know if that's one of your questions coming up, but the reason I even had the hypnosis session for it is
Oh, I would love to hear it.
great. So I had given birth to my fourth child, and I had a C-section for the birth of my child. It was necessary. After she was born, I went home. I had three other children to take care of, and my I ended up doing too much, and I reopened my C-section scar. It was incredibly painful, and the doctor, after fixing me up, told me, you have to relax. You need to just try to lay down. And but how do you do that when you have four human beings that are, everywhere? So I asked the practitioner who I had done the sessions about Kala from my other books with, if they could help out and just do a quick session, see if you can help me heal a little bit on this. So they came over, and on the day of the session, this massive storm just began right before they pulled up to my house. And when I'm telling you we had like 15 inches of raindrop in 20 minutes, it was like a flood everywhere around, just brown
Monsoon.
water and mud everywhere. So they get out of their car and they wade over to my house with like their equipment all wrapped up, and we begin the session. And during this massive storm, this lifetime is revealed to me while I'm recovering from this big incision like that's opened up, and the whole lifetime is shown to me. And at the end, I realized, like, the point of it was to explain to me that, like, even though you're going through this right now and it's difficult and you don't really see too much of a clear way forward, you've been through so much worse, and you've survived and you've
Yes.
triumphed, and you just need to give yourself a minute and allow yourself to heal. And the session really made me feel like I had just gone back to like a homeostasis. I had just balanced out. I could relax a bit. And within a few days, I was so much better, and I could I could maneuver my life again. But I found that just the need for the session and what ended up unfolding out of it was so matched up in just a way that kind of, I don't know, gave me a lot of peace inside, if that makes any
Mhm.
sense.
It
You know?
it does because uh, I lead people on meditative experiences to the Akashic records so that they can review a past life, and I travel with them in the past life, and even all the countless past life experiences I've reviewed. um, it brings you so much peace, so much understanding about yourself sometimes that can't be accessed, I don't think, any other way. You
Exactly.
tap into a part of yourself that you forgot you had.
And it's hard to explain to other people sometimes when you see the synchronicities and just
Mhm.
how much like is connected between your lifetime and your past lifetimes. But I like that to be a private little joy, that's just something for you to enjoy and to understand.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I this is why I think I read the book in 2 days
Wonderful.
because things you can't get bored with this book. That's for sure.
Yes, it's
Um,
definitely, and it's the whole thing was from one 2 hour session, one hypnosis session. Unlike the other books were
oh my
multiple sessions,
goodness,
this was
really?
literally just a 2 hour sitting and then me re-listening to the tape over and over again to write the
Mhm.
book. So a little
Wow.
bit different than the other ones, but yeah.
Uh-huh. Wow, that was quite a session in two
Right.
hours. Oh
Yeah,
my
two
gosh.
hours and all of that.
Let me see here what else I have. I had about, like I said, 17 questions.
Yeah, go. I'm ready.
Uh, I think we've talked about all of it. It's it's just I really appreciate you sharing your past lives in this form. Now, you have a publishing company. Are you publishing your own books?
Yep. Oh, yeah. I've been publishing my own books since the beginning, and then I've been doing translations, working with some really talented people over the last couple of years to get the Spanish translations done for my books. And then recently, well, it should be coming up soon, where it's going to be released in Japanese as well.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, right.
Fun.
I've had some really wonderful people donate their time and services to make that happen. So it's been a really interesting experience having to, well, you publish books in English, but then now you gotta maneuver through other
Right,
languages too,
right.
right? Yeah.
Yes. My son lives in China, and I've often thought about Chinese translation of some of my books.
Right. And it's
That
just,
would
it's
be
a whole
fun.
different audience that, you can
Uh-huh.
resonate with as well.
Now, do you take on authors
Not
to?
at the moment. I'm
Uh-huh.
not really at that point yet. I've still got a lot of things I balance over here between my family and I do a lot of farming as well. So this is kind of just a side thing that I do to make sure that my books are well protected as I publish them and just kind of, you know, give them a little, but my goal is one day I would like to. I think when things are just a little bit less busy and my children are a little more independent.
How old are your children, if I may ask?
Yeah, I have a 6-year-old, 11-year-old, and then I also have an 18 and a 19-year-old that are grown
Oh,
and do it. They do their own thing that they're not at home anymore, but yeah.
well, that's still a lot. Are they in all in Hawaii with you?
My older two live in the continental US going to school and doing their stuff, but the two younger ones are here in Hawaii with me. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful,
Yeah, the little
wonderful.
one's grown up only knowing Hawaii. She was just a baby when we moved here, so
Uh-huh.
it's been really fun to watch her just kind of assimilate to, the life around her here. She's so fun to be around because of it. She's got a lot of good, just very chilled out spirit to her.
Has she learned the pidgin English that so many of Hawaiians speak over there?
The kids pick it up so fast. Definitely. They
Yeah,
all do. They've got
yeah.
it. But they also go to Hawaiian immersion schools too. So they're learning like proper Olelo Hawaii language. So that's another good
Ooh,
thing. Another
that's
good benefit.
wonderful. Yeah, yeah. Let me see. Well, is there something else that we haven't covered about this particular lifetime that you'd like to speak about?
Well, I think I've given a bit of an explanation so far about it. I think the most interesting thing I took from the whole lifetime truly was the idea of the hybridization of humans, of how we've come together. And maybe we're not all just this mix of these foreign entities that have come and settled on Earth. Maybe we're more connected to these other beings than we've previously thought. And if that's the case, then why are we fighting with each other so much? If that is truly like our heritage, maybe if we looked at our lives a little bit differently and looked at what we want to create out of the future, having this different understanding, for me, it just was kind of eye-opening as to why we continuously fight about the same things and the power and the dominance and the need to revere these gods that, came at that point that I write about. So I don't know. I think for anyone who wants to read it, I felt it opened my eyes to an alternate understanding of who we are as a society and why we're here. And
Mhm.
if you're curious about that or past lifetimes, check it out. I try to keep my books very accessible for people, and I'm always here to talk to if you feel you've had an interesting past life. I have a lot of people who write to me and say, like, I read your book and I was in that lifetime and I know and I remember this and that.
Yeah.
I love hearing that. It's very interesting and confirming to hear from other people too. So if you're interested, check out my website. You can find, ways to contact me or just learn a little bit more about past lifetimes and my journey. It's all good.
All that contact info will be underneath here. I think that it's a wonderful blend in this particular incarnation of the spaceship life with the life of the people trying to survive under an oppressive, watchers, enslavement kind of thing. Um, and a lot more rural atmosphere. It's quite the
Yeah.
contrast. I
It
really,
definitely does, right? It hits
yeah,
that contrast point, but it also makes you think just, is what we know as our ancient history, is it really as primitive and ancient as we think it is? And
I don't think so.
oh, it's easy
Well,
to hide things. It is.
I so appreciate you and your talent. Keep
Yeah.
it up. And do you have something else in the works?
I think I'm going to actually switch genres for a little bit as a writer. I'm looking to complete maybe two other little writing projects I started way before I started this
Uh-huh.
project.
Uh-huh.
And then I think after a little bit of time, I might throw another one in or another two in there. There's plenty of material. I just kind of need a break from it as a writer right now and see what else is out there for me.
And you'll be surprised. This is what happened with me. Your imagination, when I'm writing, I see it like I'm watching a movie. I hear it. I feel the emotions. I'm writing it down. And I didn't realize at the time I was really accessing my own Akashic records, which,
Mm.
we do. And that turned out to be a trilogy. And in the last book, is a very dramatic scene. And I thought I was just writing a novel, but all of a sudden I knew what was going to happen next. And
Yes.
all of us, like light bulb moment, I thought, oh my gosh, this is a past life. And
Yeah.
here I thought I was just had a great imagination.
No, I find that's usually the way they find themselves to you. It's during those moments, sometimes when you're driving and you're kind of just like, whoa, where did I just go there for a minute in my
Yeah,
head? And you're thinking about something, dreams. There's so many powerful methods that, when you know, you know.
right, right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
you coming on again and sharing with my audience. And if they're interested, this is the book, The Daughters of Man, and it is available on Amazon. So I love you. Take care.
Thank
Enjoy that wonderful
you.
Hawaiian weather.
Most definitely. Thank you again. I really appreciate you
And
spending time talking to me.
my pleasure. We'll talk soon. Okay. Bye bye.